Angry Inch at the Kennedy Center. Get your tickets today.
Tonight, breaking news, the James Comey bombshell. On the eve of his testimony before Congress and the American people, we learn what he plans to say. What Comey revealed to the president about whether the president is under investigation. Comey saying the president demanding loyalty. And what did the president allegedly say about the investigation into Michael Flynn? Also tonight, the showdown on Capitol Hill. In addition to James Comey, did the president go to the heads of the intelligence community? What did he ask them about the Russia investigation? Tonight, their answers, and then the outrage from senators on both sides. We have breaking news from London. The new images just in tonight, the moment the attackers are taken down. The tornado touched down in this country. Several reports of funnel clouds tonight. The images coming in. And she was a high school teen at the time, now on trial, accused of sending a text to her boyfriend to take his own life. He did. The boy's mother on the stand, and today, what the judge did.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Wednesday night. And we begin with fired FBI Director James Comey. He will testify before Congress and the country tomorrow morning. But tonight here, we know how he plans to start. He will acknowledge that he did tell the president that he was not under investigation personally on multiple occasions. Comey also claims that the president, during a one-on-one dinner in the green room of the White House, demanded loyalty from Comey, saying, quote, "I need loyalty, I expect loyalty." And when it came to the investigation into retired General Michael Flynn, Comey will say the president urged him to let this go. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl leading us off.
It's dramatic and almost cinematic. I first met President-elect Trump on January 6th, James Comey writes, in a conference room at Trump Tower. Comey was there with other intelligence leaders to brief Trump on Russian interference in the election. And when that meeting wrapped, Comey says, I remained alone with the president-elect to brief him on some personally sensitive aspects of the information, even though it was salacious and unverified. Then Comey, for the first time, told Trump he was not personally the focus of a counterintelligence investigation. As soon as he left, Comey writes down what happened. I began to type it on a laptop in an FBI vehicle outside Trump Tower the moment I walked out of the meeting. Creating written records immediately after one-on-one conversations with Mr. Trump was my practice from that point forward. This had not been my practice in the past.
Oh, and there's James. Will you please? He's become more famous than me.
5 days later, Trump invites the FBI director to dinner at the White House. It turned out to be just the two of us, Comey says. The president began by asking me whether I wanted to stay on as FBI director, which I found strange. A few moments later, the president said, I need loyalty. I expect loyalty. I didn't move, speak, or change my facial expression in any way during the awkward silence that followed. We simply looked at each other in silence. Towards the end of the dinner, Comey says the president returned to the question of loyalty. He then said, I need loyalty. I replied, you will always get honesty from me. He paused and then said, that's what I want, honest loyalty. I paused and then said, you will get that from me. The next meeting, February 14th in the Oval Office, along with Vice President Pence, Attorney General Sessions, Jared Kushner, and others. Trump asks everybody to leave except Comey, who describes what happens next. The president began by saying, I want to talk about Mike Flynn. Flynn had resigned the previous day. The president began by saying Flynn hadn't done anything wrong in speaking with the Russians, but he had to let him go because he had misled the vice president. Comey says the president told him he is a good guy and has been through a lot. He repeated that Flynn hadn't done anything wrong on his calls with the Russians. He then said, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. I replied only, he is a good guy. Comey continues, saying, I did not understand the president to be talking about the broader investigation into Russia or possible links to his campaign. I could be wrong. Regardless, it was very concerning, given the FBI's role as an independent investigative agency. The president has denied asking Comey to drop the Flynn investigation.
Did you at any time urge former FBI Director James Comey in any way, shape, or form to close or to back down the investigation into Michael Flynn? And also, as you look back...
No. Next question.
After that one-on-one Oval Office meeting, Comey says he approached Attorney General Sessions. I took the opportunity to implore the Attorney General to prevent any future direct communication between the president and me. But just over a month later, a phone call. The president called me at the FBI, Comey says. He described the Russia investigation as a cloud that was impairing his ability to act on behalf of the country. He said he had nothing to do with Russia, had not been involved with hookers in Russia. He asked what we could do to lift the cloud. I responded that we were investigating the matter as quickly as we could. Comey says Trump then asked him to publicly say he was not under investigation. He repeatedly told me we need to get that fact out. Finally, on April 11th, one last conversation. Trump calling again, asking to have his name publicly cleared. And Comey says, cryptically adding this: I have been very loyal to you, very loyal. We had that thing, you know. I did not reply or ask him what he meant by that thing. That was the last time I spoke with President Trump.
And so John Carl with us live tonight from the White House. And John, if Comey told the president on multiple occasions that he wasn't under investigation, why didn't Comey go public and say that President Trump is not personally under investigation and tell the American people?
Well, Comey said that there were several reasons for not going public, primarily because if it changed and if the FBI investigation began to turn to focus on President Trump, Comey said there would have been a duty to correct the record. He would have had to come forward publicly and say the president was under investigation. By the way, David, we now have a statement from the president's personal attorney, Mark Kasowitz, noting that Comey said on 3 separate occasions that he was not under investigation. Kasowitz says the president feels completely and totally vindicated. David?
Vindicated, the word from President Trump's personal attorney tonight, John Carl. Our thanks to you, ABC's chief legal analyst Dan Abrams with us now. Dan, we do know now that Comey did in fact tell the president he's not under investigation personally. Comey saying in the memos that could change. But Comey also writes in the memos the president demanded loyalty, said he expects loyalty. And as we mentioned on the Michael Flynn investigation, he said, can you let this go? Is that appropriate between a president and an FBI director?
No, it's totally inappropriate, and here's why. The FBI takes its independence very seriously, particularly when you're talking about an investigation that touches people around Donald Trump, even if it wasn't Donald Trump himself. And on this notion that he wasn't personally being investigated, keep in mind, A, that there might be the potential that things could change, 2, that things have already changed in the fact that he was fired and what Donald Trump has said since then. So it doesn't make it illegal for Donald Trump to have made the comments he did to Comey, but it's going to be a question of the big picture here.
Dan Abrams with us tonight as well. Dan, thank you. In the meantime, on Capitol Hill, James Comey will testify first thing in the morning already tonight. Senators responding to what they've seen in his opening remarks, some outraged, and we asked what they will ask. ABC's Mary Bruce on the Hill tonight.
The Republican chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee tonight relieved to have Comey's testimony out in the open.
I'm glad to have it early and posted, and I'm sorry I took away from all of you guys your ability to find a source to leak it to you.
The hearing isn't until tomorrow, but already the reaction to Comey's account of his conversations with the president, swift, and from Democrats, fierce.
If it's accurate, it's devastating.
Devastating.
I think so.
The top Democrat leading the House investigation says Comey's testimony raises key questions.
The president demanded his loyalty, didn't get it. The president asked him to drop the Flynn case, and he didn't do it. Is this why Jim Comey was fired?
But the number 2 Republican in the Senate sees it through a different lens.
Is it appropriate for the president to be demanding loyalty of his FBI director?
I think every president wants loyalty from his appointees. But I think Mr. Comey appropriately pointed out that an FBI director is different from a traditional political appointee. And they seem to have agreed to something called honest loyalty or loyal honesty.
He talks about that phrase there, Mary Bruce with us from Capitol Hill tonight. But I want to go back to James Comey and what he plans to say tomorrow morning. He said, it's possible we understood the phrase honest loyalty differently, but I decided it wouldn't be productive to push it further. In fact, the term honest loyalty helped to end a very awkward conversation. So it's possible the two did not see eye to eye on this.
Yes, David, and Comey says that agreeing to this term, honest loyalty, is what ended that awkward conversation, and that's exactly why he decided not to push things further. But, David, there are sure to be more questions about that here tomorrow because so much of this comes down to interpretation.
I'll see you right there on the Hill first thing in the morning, Mary. Until then, next tonight here, the reports that it wasn't just James Comey that the president approached when it came to the Michael Flynn and Russia investigations. Did he then pursue heads of the intelligence community? Today, those intelligence chiefs were on Capitol Hill. They were asked, did the president ask them to intervene? Senators on both sides of the aisle were not pleased with what they heard. Here's ABC senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas tonight.
The standoff went on for 2.5 hours. Senators from both sides pressing the nation's top intelligence officials about whether President Trump asked them to intervene in the investigation into Michael Flynn or the Russia investigations in any way.
Let me ask you specifically, did the president, the reports that are out there, ask you in any way, shape or form to back off or downplay the Russia investigation?
I'm not going to discuss the specifics of conversations with the President of the United States.
Are you prepared to say that you have never felt that you've never been asked by the President or the White House to influence an ongoing investigation?
I'm not prepared to answer your question today.
At issue, critical conversations with the president. After President Trump allegedly asked then FBI Director James Comey about the investigation into Michael Flynn, saying, "I hope you can let this go." Did the president then turn to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, to sway him as well, as the Washington Post reported overnight?
I have never been pressured. I have never felt pressure to intervene or interfere in any way and shaping intelligence in a political way or in relationship to an ongoing investigation.
Lawmakers then pressing further, asking not whether they felt pressured, but simply did the president ask them to intervene?
We have press reports of not once, but twice, that the President of the United States asked you to either downplay the Russia investigation or to directly intervene with Director Comey. Can you set the record straight about what happened or didn't happen?
Confidential conversations between the president and myself. I don't believe it's appropriate for me to address that in a public session.
And other conversations, not about Flynn, this time about possible collusion with the Russians. Did the president try to get Coats and NSA Director Mike Rogers to publicly deny there was any evidence of Trump campaign officials colluding with Russians?
I have never been directed to do anything I believe to be illegal, immoral, unethical, or inappropriate.
Over and over, they would not reveal what, if anything, the president had said to them. And many senators grew frustrated, saying there was no reason not to answer the questions.
Well, I think your unwillingness to answer a very basic question speaks volumes.
Why are you not answering our
questions? Because I feel
questions?
it is inappropriate, Senator.
What you feel isn't relevant, Admiral.
I stand by the comments I've made. I'm not interested in repeating myself, sir. And I don't mean that in a contentious way.
Well, I do mean it in a contentious way.
The atmosphere reaching a boiling point.
You swore that oath to tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and today you are refusing to do so. What is the legal basis for your refusal to testify to this committee?
I'm not sure I have a legal basis.
And in the end, the grilling seemingly taking a toll, even on the NSA director, a seasoned Navy man.
Boy, some days I sure wish I was an ensign on the bridge of that destroyer again.
All right, Pierre Thomas with us live tonight as well from the FBI. All of this comes today amid the president's surprise Twitter announcement about his new choice to head the FBI. And Pierre, who is Chris Wray, and what have you learned? Was the White House surprised by this?
David, Chris Wray is a former senior Justice Department prosecutor, at one point working under James Comey when he was Deputy Attorney General. Of late, he's been in private practice, recently representing New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on the Bridgegate controversy. The announcement came today, as you said, on Twitter, catching some in the White House and many on Capitol Hill by surprise, David.
All right, Pierre Thomas with us from the FBI. Pierre, thank you. Tomorrow, James Comey's testimony live. Our special report starting at 10 a.m. right here on ABC. And, of course, for the latest developments and reporting, download the ABC News app and sign up for breaking news alerts throughout the day. And, of course, I'll see you for World News Tonight tomorrow night from Washington. In the meantime, tonight, to the other major headline at this hour, the twin terror attacks in Iran. ISIS now taking responsibility, and we do have new and dramatic video coming in tonight. Here's our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz.
Never before has ISIS managed to carry out a major attack inside Iran, but today the terrorist group struck swiftly and simultaneously. At the shrine to the late Ayatollah Khomeini, an assailant wearing a suicide vest blew himself up, with the sounds of gunfire then echoing through Tehran's streets. And a short distance away, Iran's parliament, in session at the time, targeted. Armed men, some disguising themselves with the traditional dress of Muslim women, set off on a deadly rampage. As government workers fled in panic, security guards helping the innocent escape, including a child. Inside, chilling scenes in near real time, released by ISIS itself, a gunman with a body nearby. The attackers did leave at least 12 dead and over 40 wounded, but by the end of the siege, all of the attackers lay dead as well.
President Trump